step into the shadowy elegance of Ravenwood Hall, where a butler's murder unveils a web of secrets, lies, and betrayal. Hercule Poirot, with his brilliant little grey cells, navigates a maze of clues, lavender scent, a burned letter, a sapphire necklace, to unmask a killer driven by greed and a hidden blackmailer pulling the strings. In this classic Agatha Christie-style mystery, every suspect hides a motive, and the truth is a shocking revelation that will keep you guessing until the final twist. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Ravenwood. In the soft twilight of an English autumn, Ravenwood Hall stood as a monument to opulence and secrecy, its ivy-clad towers piercing the mist that clung to the Sussex Downs. The estate, nestled in a secluded valley, was a labyrinth of gabled roofs and mullioned windows, its grandeur tempered by an air of quiet menace. The year was 1932, and the world beyond the hall's wrought iron gates churned with unrest. But within its walls, a different kind of storm was brewing. A storm of human passions, veiled motives, and as yet unknown murder. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion of Hercule Poirot, gazed out from the hired Rolls-Royce as it crunched along the gravel drive. The invitation to Ravenwood Hall had arrived unexpectedly, penned in the elegant hand of Lady Beatrice Ashford, widow of the late Sir Reginald Ashford, whose shipping fortune had built this imposing residence. The occasion was a weekend gathering to celebrate the engagement of Lady Beatrice's niece, Miss Clara Winthrop, to Mr. Julian Trevelyan, a dashing but enigmatic financier. Hastings, always susceptible to the charm of high society, had persuaded Poirot to accept the invitation, though the little Belgian detective had been less than enthusiastic. "Mon ami," Poirot had said, adjusting his impeccable Homburg hat. "These English country houses, they are always the stage for drama, non. I prefer the order of my little flat in London, where the dust does not conspire against my patent leather shoes." Yet, here they were, summoned by Lady Beatrice's promise of a matter requiring discretion. Hastings suspected it was merely a courtesy, a nod to Poirot's reputation as a solver of delicate problems. But as the car slowed before the hall's grand entrance, Hastings felt a prickle of unease. The windows glowed with lamplight, yet the air was heavy, as if the house itself were holding its breath. The butler, a gaunt figure named Grayson, greeted them with a bow that was all precision and no warmth. "Lady Beatrice awaits you in the drawing-room, gentlemen," he intoned, leading them through a cavernous hall adorned with ancestral portraits. The air smelled of polished oak and old roses. Hair was swept into a chignon, and her emerald gown shimmered in the firelight. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice warm but measured. "How good of you to come. Allow me to introduce my guests." She gestured to the others with the grace of a hostess accustomed to command. First was Clara Winthrop, a delicate beauty of 25, her auburn curls framing a face that seemed both radiant and shadowed. Her fiancé, Julian Trevelyan, stood beside her, tall and lean, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that darted like a hawk's. His smile was charming, but Hastings noted a certain calculation in it, as if he were assessing the room's value. Next was Dr. Rupert Langley, a portly physician with a florid complexion and a nervous habit of adjusting his spectacles. He mumbled a greeting, his eyes flicking toward Clara with an intensity that seemed more than professional. Beside him stood Mrs. Evelyn Carver, a widow in her 40s, her black dress relieved only by a single pearl brooch. Her gaze was cool, almost predatory, as she acknowledged Poirot with a nod. The final guest was Mr. Harold Vance, a solicitor and Lady Beatrice's distant cousin. His thinning hair and pinched expression suggested a man perpetually burdened by ledgers and secrets. "A pleasure, Monsieur Poirot," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I've read of your exploits. quite theatrical. Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching with the faintest hint of amusement. Theatrical, monsieur? No, no. It is merely the application of order and method to the chaos of human affairs. Dinner was announced, and the party moved to the dining room, where a table gleamed with silver and crystal. The meal was exquisite. Consommé, roasted pheasant, and a pear tart that Poirot declared almost as perfect as my own recipe. Yet, beneath the clink of glasses and polite conversation, tension simmered. Clara seemed distracted, her laughter forced. Julian's hand lingered too long on hers, prompting a fleeting frown from Dr. Langley. Mrs. Carver watched them all with a detached curiosity, while Mr. Vance muttered about estate taxes to no one in particular. Lady Beatrice, presiding at the head of the table, steered the conversation with practiced ease. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I invited you not only for your company, but because I value your insight. There have been irregularities at Ravenwood. Small things, missing papers, odd noises in the night. I fear someone may be taking advantage of my hospitality." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Irregularities, madam? You intrigue me." "The human heart, mademoiselle. It creaks louder than any floorboard." The evening progressed, and after dinner the party retired to the library for coffee and brandy. The room was a haven of leather-bound books and heavy drapes, its atmosphere thick with the scent of aged paper. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting shadows that danced across the faces of the guests. Poirot, ever observant, noted the way Julian avoided Lady Beatrice's gaze, the way Dr. Langley's hand trembled as he poured his drink, and the way Mrs. Carver's eyes lingered on a sapphire necklace Clara wore, a family heirloom Lady Beatrice had mentioned. As midnight approached, the company began to disperse. Clara excused herself, claiming a headache, and Julian followed her upstairs. Dr. Langley lingered by the fire, lost in thought, while Mrs. Carver and Mr. Vance engaged in a hushed conversation by the window. Lady Beatrice, ever the gracious hostess, bid Poirot and Hastings good night, promising a tour of the estate in the morning. Hastings, climbing the grand staircase to his room, felt a vague disquiet. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" he asked as they reached the guest wing. "Lady Beatrice's irregularities. Do you think there's more to it?" Poirot paused, his hand on the doorknob of his room. "Mon ami, in a house such as this, where wealth and secrets are old companions, there is always more to it. The little grey cells, they are already at work. But for now, we sleep. Tomorrow, we shall see what Ravenwood Hall conceals." As Hastings retired, the house settled into silence, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Yet somewhere in the maze of corridors, a shadow moved, a shadow that knew the hour of death was near. Chapter 2. The Scream in the Night. The clock in Ravenwood Hall's great hall struck 2 in the morning, its chimes reverberating through the silent corridors like a warning. Captain Arthur Hastings, roused from a fitful sleep, lay in his 4-poster bed, the heavy damask curtains muffling the sounds of the night. He had been dreaming of the war, of trenches and distant gunfire, when a piercing scream shattered the stillness. It was a sound of raw terror, unmistakable even through the thick oak door of his guest room. Hastings bolted upright, his heart pounding. He fumbled for his dressing gown, his military instincts urging him to action. As he stepped into the dimly lit corridor, he saw other doors opening, their occupants emerging in various states of disarray. Lady Beatrice, her silver hair loose and her face pale, appeared at the far end of the hall, a candelabrum clutched in her trembling hands. of shadows, the flickering light of Lady Beatrice's candles casting grotesque shapes on the panelled walls. Behind them, Mr. Harold Vance shuffled along, muttering about unseemly disturbances, while Mrs. Evelyn Carver followed with a composure that seemed almost unnatural. They reached the source of the commotion. Clara Winthrop's bedroom. The door stood ajar, and inside, a scene of chaos unfolded. Clara sat on the edge of her bed, her face buried in her hands, her auburn curls dishevelled. Julian Trevelyan knelt beside her, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. But it was the figure on the floor that drew every eye. Grayson, the butler, lay crumpled near the fireplace, his gaunt frame unnaturally still. A dark stain spread across the Persian rug beneath him, and a silver letter opener, its handle encrusted with garnets, protruded from his chest. "Good heavens!" Hastings exclaimed, his voice hoarse. "He's been murdered!" Dr. Langley, ever the physician, knelt beside Grayson, his fingers searching for a pulse. After a moment, he shook his head. "Dead," he pronounced, his florid face paling. "Stabbed through the heart. He's been gone perhaps half an hour." Lady Beatrice, her composure faltering, gripped the doorframe. "This is monstrous," she whispered. "Grayson has been with us for 20 years. Who could do such a thing?" Mrs. Carver, her dark eyes scanning the room, spoke softly. "We mustn't touch anything. The police will need to see it as it is." "Police?" Mr. Vance snapped, his solicitor's instincts kicking in. "This will ruin the family's reputation. Surely we can handle this discreetly." "Discreetly?" Julian Trevelyan rose, his voice taut. "A man is dead, Vance. This isn't a matter for your ledgers." Clara, still trembling, looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "I heard a noise," she said, her voice barely audible. "I woke and saw someone by the fireplace. I screamed and they ran. Then Julian came, and we found Grayson." Hastings, his mind racing, noted the details. The open window, its curtains swaying in the night breeze. The overturned chair near the hearth. The sapphire necklace, no longer around Clara's neck, but lying on the dressing table, its clasp undone. Something about the scene felt staged, though he couldn't place why. It was then that Hercule Poirot appeared, immaculate despite the hour, his silk dressing gown tied with precision, his moustache as pristine as ever. His dark eyes swept the room, taking in every detail with the intensity of a hawk. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, stepping carefully around the body. "Preserve the scene, Captain Hastings, if you please. Ensure that no one enters or leaves this room until I have examined it." Hastings nodded, taking his post by the door as Poirot began his meticulous inspection. The little detective moved with the grace of a dancer, his gloved hands hovering over objects without touching them. He noted the letter opener, its blade clean except for the blood at its tip. He studied the rug, the chair, the window, and the necklace, his lips pursed in thought. "Curieux," he muttered. "Very curious." "Curious?" Julian said, his tone sharp. "What's curious about a murder?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Everything, Monsieur Trevelyan. For example, why does a butler, so loyal, so discreet, find himself in Mademoiselle Clara's room at such an hour? And why, if the intruder fled, is the window open but the latch undisturbed?" Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You think I'm lying?" "No, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. "I think only that the truth is a puzzle, and we have but a few pieces. Now, let us summon the police, but first I must ask each of you where you were at the time of the scream." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Lady Beatrice spoke first. "I was in my room, asleep, until the scream woke me." "As was I," said Mr. Vance, though his eyes darted to the side. Mrs. Carver inclined her head. "I was reading in my room. I heard the scream and came at once." Dr. Langley adjusted his spectacles. I was in the library, reviewing some notes. It took me a moment to find my way here. Julian's jaw tightened. I was in my room, next to Clara's. I heard her scream and ran to her. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And you, Mademoiselle Clara? You saw this figure? Can you describe it? Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her nightgown. It was dark, a shadow, really. Tall, perhaps. I couldn't see their face. Very well, Poirot said. We shall speak more in the morning. For now, I suggest we retire. Under the watchful eye of Captain Hastings, of course. The police will arrive soon, and Hercule Poirot will ensure that no detail escapes his notice. As the group dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot back to his room, his mind a whirl of questions. What do you make of it, Poirot? He asked. Clara's story about the shadow, do you believe her? Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his eyes distant. Belief, mon ami, is not the method of Hercule Poirot. I observed scene, took statements, and declared the case a straightforward burglary gone wrong. Hastings, watching Poirot's subtle frown, knew better. This was no simple crime. The hall, with its secrets and its shadows, held a riddle that only Poirot could solve. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot's Method. The morning sun struggled through the heavy clouds over Ravenwood Hall, casting a pallid light across the estate's manicured lawns. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of damp earth and fading roses. But within the hall, the atmosphere was thick with suspicion. The murder of Grayson, the butler, had shattered the veneer of civility that had cloaked the gathering. And now each guest moved with the wariness of one who knows they are being watched. Captain Arthur Hastings stood in the breakfast room, where a sideboard groaned under the weight of silver dishes filled with kedgeree, kippers, and toast. The guests, though impeccably dressed, ate sparingly, their eyes darting to one another as if seeking the telltale sign of guilt. Lady Beatrice, at the head of the table, maintained her regal composure, though her knuckles whitened around her teacup. Clara Winthrop, pale and silent, picked at a piece of toast, while Julian Trevelyan, her fiancé, sat with a forced nonchalance, his fingers drumming on the tablecloth. Dr. Rupert Langley, his spectacles fogged from the steam of his coffee, muttered about the inconvenience of police inquiries, while Mrs. Evelyn Carver, serene in her black silk, observed the room with the detachment of the chess master. Mr. Harold Vance, the solicitor, scribbled notes in a small leather-bound book, his lips pursed in disapproval. Hercule Poirot entered last, his appearance a study in precision. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his moustache was perfectly waxed, and his dark eyes sparkled with an intensity that belied the gravity of the situation. "Bonjour, mes amis," he said, taking his seat with a flourish. "A fine morning, is it not? Though perhaps less fine for poor Monsieur Grayson." The remark drew a sharp intake of breath from Clara, and Julian's hand stilled. Lady Beatrice set down her cup with a clink. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I trust you slept well, despite the events of the night?" "Sleep, madame, is a luxury I permit myself only when the little grey cells are satisfied," Poirot replied, selecting a single slice of toast. "And they are not yet satisfied. But fear not, I, Hercule Poirot, am here to bring order to this chaos." Inspector Grayson, the policeman, had remained at the hall, his men combing the grounds for evidence. He entered the breakfast room now, his heavy boots thudding on the parquet floor. "Mr. Poirot," he said gruffly, "I've taken statements, and my men have searched the east wing. Looks like a thief." "Inspector? No, no. Simplicity is the refuge of the lazy mind. Tell me, have you examined the letter opener, the window, the necklace?" The inspector bristled. "The letter opener's the murder weapon, plain as day. The window was open, likely how the intruder got in. As for the necklace, it's valuable, isn't it? Probably what the thief was after." "Perhaps. Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "But permit me to observe, Inspector, that a thief who leaves a sapphire necklace behind is either very clumsy or very clever. And the latch on the window, it was not forced. Curious, no?" Inspector Grayson muttered something about fanciful theories and excused himself to oversee his men. Hastings, watching Poirot, knew that the little detective was already several steps ahead. "What are you thinking, Poirot?" he whispered as the others resumed their strained conversation. "I am thinking, mon ami, that this crime is not what it seems," Poirot replied, his voice low. "The letter opener, it is too convenient. The window, too perfect. And Mademoiselle Clara's shadow, too vague. We must look beyond the obvious to the hearts and minds of those in this house." After breakfast, Poirot requested permission from Lady Beatrice to inspect the crime scene once more. She agreed, her face tight with unease, and led him, Hastings, and the inspector to Clara's bedroom. The room was much as they had left it. Grayson's body had been removed, but the blood-stained rug remained, and the letter opener lay on a table, now bagged by the police. The sapphire necklace still gleamed on the dressing table, its clasp undone but intact. Poirot moved with the precision of a watchmaker, his gloved hands hovering over each detail. He examined the fireplace, noting a faint smudge of ash on the hearthstone. He studied the overturned chair, its legs scuffed as if dragged. He peered at the window, his fingers tracing the sill. "Hastings," he said, "observe the dust here. It is undisturbed, except for a single mark, a handprint, perhaps, but too large for Mademoiselle Clara's delicate fingers." The inspector scoffed. "A handprint? Could be anyone's. The maid's, the groundskeeper—" "No, Inspector," Poirot interrupted. "The maids do not clean at 2 in the morning, and the groundskeeper does not scale walls to enter through windows. This mark, it tells a story, and the story is not one of a thief." He turned to the necklace, lifting it carefully with a hand. "See something, or was he summoned?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Poirot continued his inspection, noting the position of Clara's bed, the angle of the door, and the faint scent of lavender that lingered in the room. "Curieux," he murmured. "The lavender, it is not from Mademoiselle Clara's perfume. It is older, more medicinal." Hastings tried to keep up, scribbled notes in his pocketbook. "What does it mean, Poirot? The lavender, the handprint?" "It means, mon ami, that we must speak to everyone again. Each person in this house has a secret, and secrets, they are like cracks in a wall. Apply pressure, and the truth will emerge." The rest of the morning was spent in interviews, conducted in the library under Poirot's watchful eye. Clara, still shaken, repeated her story of the shadow, but Poirot noted her hesitation when asked about Grayson's presence. "I don't know why he was here," she said, her voice trembling. "Perhaps he heard me stir and came to check." Julian, questioned next, was defensive. "I was asleep until Clara screamed. I didn't see Grayson until we found him dead. Why are you hounding us? The man was stabbed by a thief." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A thief, monsieur? Perhaps, but tell me, why did you not mention the argument you had with Grayson yesterday afternoon? I overheard, you see, in the garden. Something about debts unpaid." Julian flushed. "That was nothing. A misunderstanding about a delivery. Grayson was mistaken." Dr. Langley, when questioned, admitted to being in the library but claimed he had dozed off over his notes. Mrs. Carver said she had been awake, reading, but her room was far from Clara's, and she heard nothing until the scream. Mr. Vance, irritable as ever, insisted he had been asleep and resented the implication of involvement. Lady Beatrice, last to be questioned, was forthright. Grayson was loyal, but he had his faults. He was
curious, perhaps too curious, about the family's affairs. I had warned him to mind his duties. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, madame. Your candour is most helpful. Now I must reflect. The little grey cells, they are busy. As the day wore on, the police continued their search, but Inspector Grayson's theory of a bungled burglary held firm. Hastings, however, knew better. Poirot's mind was weaving a web, and soon the threads of deceit would be caught in it. Chapter 4. The questions deepen. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parquet floors of Ravenwood Hall, its golden rays doing little to dispel the chill that had settled over the house. The murder of Grayson, the butler, hung like a storm cloud, and the guests moved through the grand rooms with the caution of those who sense a predator among them. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever attuned to the undercurrents of tension, noted the cufflinks. The hall, once a symbol of elegance, now felt like a stage where every actor concealed a script. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the oppressive atmosphere, had requested the use of the morning room for his interviews. The room, with its tall windows overlooking the rose garden and its walls lined with pastoral watercolors, offered a serene contrast to the grim task at hand. Poirot sat at a mahogany writing desk, his notebook open, his fountain pen poised like a conductor's baton. His moustache, immaculate as ever, seemed to bristle with anticipation as he prepared to unravel the threads of the mystery. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, who stood by the window, "the human heart, it is a labyrinth, no? But with method, we shall navigate its twists. Today, we probe deeper. We ask not only where they were, but why they lie." Hastings nodded, though he felt a familiar pang of frustration. Poirot's cryptic pronouncements were as maddening as they were brilliant. "You think they're all lying, then?" "Not all, perhaps," Poirot replied, his eyes twinkling, "but enough. The truth, it hides in the contradictions, in the silences between words. Bring in Mademoiselle Clara first, if you please." Clara Winthrop entered, her auburn curls pinned neatly, but her face pale as porcelain. She sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her sapphire necklace now absent, replaced by a simple silk scarf. Poirot's gaze lingered on the scarf, but he began with a gentle tone. "Mademoiselle, you have had a shock, oui? But I must ask you to recall the events of last night with precision. The shadow you saw, what was its movement? Did it pause, hesitate, or flee at once?" Clara's eyes flickered with uncertainty. It moved quickly, Monsieur Poirot. Toward the window, I think. I was so frightened, I can't be sure. And Monsieur Grayson," Poirot continued, "you are certain he was not in the room when you woke? You heard no sound before the shadow appeared?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the scarf. I heard a floorboard creak, perhaps, but I thought it was the house settling. Old houses, you know." "Oui, I know," Poirot said, his voice soft but probing. "And the necklace, mademoiselle? It was on your dressing table, not around your neck. Why?" Clara flushed. "I took it off before bed. It's heavy and I didn't want to sleep with it on." Poirot nodded, jotting a note. "Merci, mademoiselle. You may go, but reflect, if you please, on any detail you may have overlooked. The smallest thing. It may be the key." Next came Julian Trevelyan, his lean frame taut with irritation. He sat with a casual elegance, but his eye— "You called it a misunderstanding. Yet I observed you, monsieur, and your voice was raised. What was this debt of which he spoke?" Julian's jaw tightened. "It was nothing. Grayson thought I owed the estate for some wine I'd ordered for the engagement party. A clerical error, nothing more." "A clerical error that brought such anger?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Curieux. And tell me, monsieur, did you see anyone in the corridor when you ran to Mademoiselle Clara's room?" "No one," Julian said quickly. "It was dark, chaotic. I was focused on Clara." Poirot made another note. his pen scratching softly. "Very well. You may go." Dr. Rupert Langley was next, his florid face glistening with sweat despite the cool room. He adjusted his spectacles repeatedly, a nervous tic that Poirot noted with interest. "Doctor," Poirot began, "you were in the library, you say, reviewing notes. At 2 in the morning? A most dedicated physician." Langley cleared his throat. "I couldn't sleep. I often work late. I was reading a medical journal on toxicology, actually." "Toxicology?" Poirot's eyes sharpened. "An interesting choice. And you heard nothing until the scream?" "Nothing," Langley said, his voice firm, but his hands trembling. "The library is far from the East Wing." Poirot leaned forward. "And your interest in Mademoiselle Clara? Purely professional, oui?" Langley's face reddened. "Of course! She's been under my care for a nervous condition, nothing more." Mrs. Evelyn Carver entered next, her black dress absorbing the light like a void. Her composure was unshakable, her voice low and measured. "Monsieur Poirot, I was in my room reading. I heard the scream and came at once. I have nothing more to add." "Yet you observe, madame," Poirot said. "Your eyes, they miss nothing. Did you perhaps notice anything unusual in the days before the murder? A glance, a word, a tension?" Mrs. Carver's lips curved faintly. "This house is full of tensions, Monsieur Poirot. Old grudges, new ambitions. But I keep to myself. I find it safer." Mr. Harold Vance, the solicitor, was the last to be questioned. His pinched expression and curt answers suggested a man eager to be elsewhere. "I was asleep," he said. "I heard the scream, I came, that's all." "And your relationship with Grayson?" Poirot asked. "He was, I understand, privy to certain family matters. Did he ever speak to you of irregularities?" Vance's eyes narrowed. "He was a butler, not a confidant. He knew his place." Poirot closed his notebook with a snap. "Merci, monsieur. You have all been most illuminating." As the interviews concluded, Poirot and Hastings walked the grounds, the detective's cane tapping rhythmically on the gravel path. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" Hastings asked. "They all stick."
Everything is off. The alibis. They are too neat, like a play rehearsed. But there is one detail that intrigues me. The lavender. It is not Mademoiselle Clara's scent, nor Madame Carver's. It is medicinal, oui, but also familiar. I must consult my memory." They paused by the rose garden, where a gardener was pruning bushes. Poirot's eyes lingered on the man's hands, calloused and stained with earth. "Hastings," he said suddenly, "fetch me the household ledger. I wish to see who has access to the East Wing keys." Hastings returned with the ledger, and Poirot pored over it, his fingers tracing names and duties. "Grayson had a master key," he murmured. "But so did the housekeeper, Mrs. Poole. And she, I recall, uses lavender water for her rheumatism." "Mrs. Poole?" Hastings said, surprised. "But she's not even a suspect." "Not yet," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But the little grey cells, they whisper that no one in Ravenwood Hall is above suspicion." As evening fell, the police continued their inquiries, but Inspector Grayson remained convinced of his burglary theory. Poirot, however, was weaving a different narrative, one that would soon unravel the secrets hidden within the hall's ancient walls. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings Multiply. The afternoon light waned over Ravenwood Hall, casting the estate in a somber glow that seemed to mirror the growing unease within its walls. The murder of Grayson the butler had stirred a hornet's nest of suspicion, and the guests moved through the grand rooms like pieces on a chessboard, each maneuver calculated, each glance laden with meaning. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal observer, felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon him. Yet he trusted that Hercule Poirot's methodical mind would soon bring clarity to the chaos. Poirot, ensconced in the morning room, had transformed the space into a command center of sorts. A small table held his notebook,
a map of the East Wing sketched in his precise hand, and a list of the household's keys and their keepers. His moustache twitched with satisfaction as he reviewed his notes, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of frustration. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, "the puzzle, it grows complex. But complexity is merely simplicity disguised. We must peel back the layers." Hastings, standing by the window, glanced out at the grounds, where Inspector Grayson's men were still searching for signs of an intruder. "The inspector seems certain it's a burglary gone wrong," he said. "He's fixated on that open window." Poirot's lips curled in disdain. The inspector, he sees what is presented to him, not what is hidden. The window, the letter opener, the necklace, these are the red herrings, Hastings, by years of service. Her hands, gnarled from rheumatism, clutched a vial of lavender water, its scent unmistakable. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he greeted her. "Madame Poole, you are most kind to join us. I have questions about the night of the tragedy." Mrs. Poole's expression was guarded, her eyes darting to the floor. "I was in my room, sir, in the servants' quarters. I heard nothing until the scream woke the house." "And your key, madame?" Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "The master key to the East Wing. Where was it kept?" "In my bureau. Locked," she said quickly. "I checked it this morning. It's still there." "Curieux," Poirot murmured. "And you use lavender water, oui? For your rheumatism?" Mrs. Poole nodded, her cheeks flushing. "It helps with the pain, sir. I've used it for years." Poirot made a note, then dismissed her with a courteous nod. As she left, Hastings whispered, "Do you think she's involved, Poirot? That lavender scent in Clara's room? It is a clue, mon ami, but not yet a conclusion," Poirot replied. "The lavender, it links to Mrs. Poole, but also to something deeper. I must reflect." Their next visitor was unannounced. Inspector Grayson, his face set in a scowl. "Mr. Poirot," he said, "we found something. A groundskeeper saw a man in a dark coat near the East Wing last night, around 1 o'clock. Matches the description of a known thief in the area, Tom Rourke. I'm sending my men to track him down." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "A thief, you say? Convenient, no? And this groundskeeper, he is certain of the time?" "Certain enough," the inspector said. "He was checking the stables. Says the man was lurking near the rose garden." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. "Very well, Inspector. Pursue your thief. But I, Hercule Poirot, will pursue the truth." As the inspector left, Poirot turned to his map of the East Wing. "The rose garden, Hastings. It is directly below Mademoiselle Clara's window. Yet the ground there is soft, and my inspection this morning revealed no footprints. This thief is a phantom, perhaps, or a distraction." The day progressed with a tense luncheon, where the guests' strained politeness bordered on farce. Clara, still pale, avoided Julian's gaze, while Dr. Langley's nervous tics grew more pronounced. Mrs. Carver, ever watchful, made a pointed remark about hidden motives, prompting a sharp retort from Mr. Vance about meddling outsiders. Lady Beatrice, presiding over the meal, called for calm, but her voice trembled. After luncheon, Poirot requested a private word with Lady Beatrice in the library. She sat stiffly, her emerald eyes wearing family matters. "Did he ever speak of Monsieur Trevelyan's financial affairs?" Lady Beatrice hesitated. Grayson was discreet, but yes, he mentioned concerns. Julian's business ventures, it seems, are not as prosperous as he claims. Grayson overheard him on the telephone, speaking of debts. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you did not think to mention this before?" "I thought it irrelevant," she said, a voice tight. "Julian is to marry Clara. His troubles will be resolved." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone unreadable. "But troubles, madame, have a way of leading to tragedy." As evening approached, Poirot and Hastings took a walk through the rose garden, the detective's cane sinking slightly into the earth. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot said. pointing to the ground beneath Clara's window. No footprints, no signs of a ladder. Yet the inspector's thief was seen here. It is a lie, or it is a misdirection. Then who killed Grayson? Hastings asked, exasperated. And why? Poirot paused, his gaze distant. The why, mon ami, is the key. Grayson was no random victim. He was in Mademoiselle Clara's room for a reason, perhaps to deliver a message, perhaps to confront someone. And the letter opener, it was taken from the library desk. Someone in this house chose it deliberately. They returned to the hall, where the atmosphere grew heavier with each passing hour. At dinner, the conversation was stilted, punctuated by the clink of cutlery and the occasional cough. Clara excused herself early, claiming fatigue, and Julian followed her, his expression stormy. Dr. Langley, emboldened by wine, began a rambling discourse on toxicology, only to be silenced by a sharp look from Mrs. Carver. Mr. Vance, meanwhile, muttered about the cost of police investigations, earning a reproving glance from Lady Beatrice. As the meal ended, Poirot rose, his presence commanding silence. "Mes amis," he said, "I have observed you all, and I see the threads of this mystery beginning to form a pattern. But I require one thing more: honesty. Tomorrow, I shall ask each of you to account for your movements in the hour before the scream. Prepare yourselves, for the truth, it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, and Hastings felt a shiver of anticipation. The red herrings were multiplying, but Poirot's net was closing. The question was not if the truth would be revealed, but who would be caught in its snare. Chapter 6. A Clue in the Ashes. The dawn of the third day at Ravenwood Hall broke with a heavy mist that clung to the estate like a shroud, muffling the sounds of the waking world. Inside, the air was no less oppressive. Seemed to whisper of hidden truths in its creaking timbers and shadowed corners. Hercule Poirot, ever the master of order, was already at work in the morning room when Hastings joined him. The little detective stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the fog, his notebook open on the table beside a cup of steaming coffee. His mustache, as always, was a testament to his unyielding precision, but his eyes held a spark of excitement. "Bon matin, mon ami," he greeted Hastings. "The little grey cells, they are alive with possibilities today. We are close to a breakthrough. I feel it." Hastings, rubbing sleep from his eyes, took a seat. "A breakthrough, Poirot. Have you found something new?" "Not found, Hastings, seen," Poirot replied, tapping his temple. "The clue, it was there all along, in the ashes of the fireplace in Mademoiselle Clara's room. Come, we must return to the scene." They made their way to the east wing, where Clara's bedroom remained sealed by Inspector Grayson's orders. The inspector himself was absent, pursuing his phantom thief, Tom Rourke, in the nearby village. This suited Poirot, who preferred to work without the interference of what he called the official mind. The room was as they had left it. The blood-stained rug, the overturned chair, the sapphire necklace on the dressing table, and the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. Poirot knelt by the fireplace, his gloved hands sifting through the ashes with the delicacy of an archaeologist. "Observe, Hastings," he said, holding up a small, charred fragment of paper. "This was not here by accident. It is a piece of a letter, burned in haste, but not entirely destroyed." Hastings peered at the fragment, which bore a few legible words in a looping script. "Must be told, before it is too late." The rest was reduced to ash, but Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph. "This, mon ami, is no ordinary fire. Someone sought to destroy evidence, but they were careless. The question is, who?" He placed the fragment in a small envelope, then turned his attention to the hearthstone, where he had previously noted a smudge of ash. "This mark," he said, "it is not from the fire. It is grease, perhaps from a boot, and it is fresh. Someone stood here, perhaps to burn this letter, perhaps to watch the room." Hastings frowned. "But who, Poirot?" Clara was the only one in the room when she screamed. Was she? Poirot's eyebrows rose. Or was she merely the only one we saw? The shadow she described, it is too convenient, too vague. I begin to suspect it was not an intruder, but someone already within the house. Their inspection was interrupted by the arrival of Lady Beatrice, her face drawn but composed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I trust you are making progress?"
"Mature," Poirot replied. "But I have a question for you. This fireplace in Mademoiselle Clara's room, when was it last cleaned?" Lady Beatrice frowned. "The maids clean it daily, but with the events, they may not have attended to it yesterday." "Précisément," Poirot said. "And yet there is fresh ash and a fragment of a letter. Tell me, madame, did Grayson ever handle correspondence for the family? Letters, perhaps, of a sensitive nature?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, her fingers tightening on her shawl. "Grayson was trusted with many tasks. He occasionally sorted my private correspondence, yes, but I cannot imagine—" "You cannot imagine, madame, but I must," Poirot interrupted gently. "The little grey cells, they imagine all possibilities. Merci, you have been most helpful." As Lady Beatrice departed, Poirot turned to Hastings. "We must speak to the maids. They see what others do not. And then, I think, we shall have a little chat with Monsieur Trevelyan." The maids, nervous but cooperative, confirmed that the fireplace had not been cleaned since the morning before the murder. One, a young girl named Elsie, mentioned seeing Grayson in the library late that evening, carrying a bundle of letters. "He looked worried, sir," she said, twisting her apron. "Not like himself at all." Poirot's next interview was with Julian Trevelyan, who entered the morning room with a scowl. "This is becoming absurd, Poirot," he said, tossing his cigarette case onto the table. "You're treating us like criminals." "Not criminals, monsieur. Suspects," Poirot said, his tone calm but firm. "There is a difference. Now, tell me about this letter. A letter, perhaps, that you did not wish seen. A letter burned in haste." Julian's face paled, but he recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was in my room, as I told you." "And yet," Poirot said, producing the charred fragment, "this suggests otherwise. Must be told. Before it is too late. Does this mean nothing to you?" Julian's eyes flickered, but he shook his head. "Nothing. You're chasing shadows, Poirot." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing. "But shadows, monsieur, have a way of revealing their masters." The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. Inspector Grayson returned, empty-handed but undeterred, insisting that Tom Rourke remained the prime suspect. Poirot, meanwhile, continued his quiet observations, noting the way Clara avoided the library, the way Dr. Langley's hands trembled when he poured his tea, the way Mrs. Carver's gaze lingered on Julian. With silence, Mrs. Carver, her voice low and deliberate, remarked on the fragility of trust, prompting a sharp retort from Lady Beatrice about guests who overstay their welcome. Mr. Vance, as usual, muttered about expenses, his pen scratching in his notebook. As the meal ended, Poirot rose, his presence commanding attention. "Mes amis," he said, "the net of truth is tightening. Tomorrow I shall ask each of you to provide a detailed account of your movements in the hour before the scream. And I warn you, the little grey cells, they do not rest. They see what you hope to hide." The guests dispersed, their faces a gallery of unease. Hastings, following Poirot to his room, felt a surge of anticipation. "You're closing in, aren't you?" he said. "That letter fragment, it's the key, isn't it?" Poirot smiled, his eyes gleaming. "One key, mon ami, among many. The ashes, the lavender, the shadow, they are pieces of a mosaic. Soon
we shall see the picture entire. But for now, we watch, we listen, and we wait. As night fell over Ravenwood Hall, the mist thickened, and the house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the truth to emerge from the shadows. Chapter 7. The Cracks in the Facade. The morning mist had burned away by the time Ravenwood Hall stirred to life, but the air within remained heavy with suspicion. The murder of Grayson, the butler, had fractured the delicate civility of the household, and the guests moved through the grand rooms like actors in a play nearing its climax, each aware that the curtain was about to fall. Captain Arthur Hastings, sipping his morning tea in the breakfast room, observed the strained faces around him. The clink of porcelain and the rustle of newspapers could not mask the undercurrent of dread. Hercule Poirot entered with his usual precision, his black suit immaculate, his mustache a masterpiece of symmetry. His dark eyes swept the room, noting Clara Winthrop's pallor, Julian Trevelyan's restless fingers, Dr. Rupert Langley's nervous cough, Mrs. Evelyn Carver's enigmatic calm, and Mr. Harold Vance's perpetual scowl. Lady Beatrice, presiding over the table, maintained her composure, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of exhaustion. "Bonjour, mes amis," Poirot said, taking his seat. "A new day, and with it, new opportunities to uncover the truth. The little grey cells, they are restless, no?" Lady Beatrice set down her cup with a delicate clink. "Monsieur Poirot, I trust your investigations are nearing a conclusion. The police are no closer to finding this thief, and the household cannot endure much more disruption." Poirot's lips curved faintly, was certain, would soon crack. After breakfast, Poirot convened the group in the library, where the fire crackled softly, casting shadows across the leather-bound volumes. Inspector Grayson, still clinging to his burglary theory, stood by the door, his notebook at the ready. Poirot, seated at a long oak table, opened his own notebook and began. "Mademoiselle Clara," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "let us begin with you. The hour before your scream, at, let us say, 1 o'clock, what were you doing?" Clara, her hands clasped tightly, spoke in a low voice. "I was in my room, trying to sleep. I'd been restless. I heard nothing until the creak, then the shadow, as I told you." Poirot nodded, his pen scratching. "And you, Monsieur Trevelyan?" Julian leaned back, his expression defiant. "I was in my room, next to Clara's. I was reading, then I dozed off. I woke when I heard her scream." "Reading?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "What book, monsieur?" Julian hesitated, then said, "A financial journal. I don't recall the title." "Curious," Poirot murmured. "A man of business, yet so vague about his reading. And you, Dr. Langley?" The physician adjusted his spectacles, his face flushed. "I was in the library, as I said. I'd been reading on toxicology. Then I dozed off in my chair. I woke at the scream." Mrs. Carver, her voice smooth as silk, said, "I was in my room reading a novel. Jane Austen, if you must know. I heard nothing until the commotion." Mr. Vance, his tone curt, said, "I was asleep. I've nothing to add." Lady Beatrice, last to speak, said, "I was in my room, writing letters. I heard no disturbances until Clara's scream." Poirot closed his notebook with a snap. "Merci. Your accounts are consistent. Too consistent, perhaps. But let us turn to a new detail. The letter opener, taken from this very library. Who was here yesterday evening, before dinner?" A silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Dr. Langley cleared his throat. "I was here, briefly, looking for a book." "As was I," Mrs. Carver said, her eyes meeting Poirot's without flinching. "I enjoy the library's quiet." Julian shrugged. "I passed through looking for Clara. I didn't stay." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And the letter opener? It was on this desk, oui? Yet none of you saw it taken. Curious, no?"
Inspector Grayson interjected. "Mr. Poirot, my men found a footprint in the rose garden this morning. Matches the boots of Tom Rourke, the thief. We're closing in on him." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A footprint, you say? Convenient after days of Interviews concluded. Poirot and Hastings ventured to the rose garden, where the inspector's men had marked a single, clear boot print in the soft earth. Poirot knelt, his cane planted beside him, and studied the mark. "Hastings," he said, "observe the edges. They are too sharp, too perfect. This print was made deliberately, perhaps this morning, to mislead." Hastings frowned. "You mean someone planted it? But who?" "Someone who wishes us to chase shadows," Poirot replied. "But the little gray cells, they are not so easily fooled." Back in the library, Poirot summoned Elsie, the young maid, who fidgeted under his gaze. "Mademoiselle Elsie," he said, "you saw Monsieur Grayson with letters in the library. Did you see him with the letter opener?" Elsie's eyes widened. I think so, sir. He was holding it, like he was opening a letter, but I didn't stay long." "And the letters?" Poirot pressed. "Did you see their contents?" "No, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "But one had a red seal, like the kind Lady Beatrice uses for her private correspondence." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, Elsie. You have been most helpful." As the day wore on, the cracks in the guests' facades began to show. At luncheon, Clara snapped at Julian when he touched her hand, her voice sharp with irritation. Dr. Langley spilled his wine, his hands shaking, and Mrs. Carver's cryptic smile seemed to unsettle Mr. Vance, who excused himself abruptly. Lady Beatrice, ever the hostess, tried to maintain order, but her voice betrayed a strain. That evening, Poirot gathered the group in the drawing room, his demeanor grave. "Mes amis," he said, "the truth is near, but it requires one more step. The letter opener, the footprint, the burned letter. These are not accidents. Someone in this room knows more than they have said. I ask you now, speak, before the truth speaks for you." A heavy silence followed, broken only by Clara's soft sob. Julian's face darkened, and Dr. Langley's spectacles slipped down his nose. Mrs. Carver's eyes narrowed, and Mr. Vance's pen stopped scratching. Lady Beatrice rose, her voice steady but cold. "Monsieur Poirot, I trust you will resolve this soon. The honor of Ravenwood depends on it." Poirot inclined his head. "The honor, madame, and the truth. They shall both be served." As the guests dispersed, Hastings followed, reveal a landscape as tense as the inhabitants within. The murder of Grayson, the butler, had woven a web of distrust that tightened with each passing hour, and the grand estate, once a symbol of refinement, now felt like a gilded cage. Captain Arthur Hastings, sipping his tea in the breakfast room, observed the guests with a growing sense of unease. Their polite facades were crumbling, their glances sharp with suspicion, their silences heavy with unspoken truths. Hercule Poirot entered, his presence as precise as a metronome, his black suit pristine, his mustache a monument to order. Yet his dark eyes burned with an intensity that suggested the little grey cells were working at a feverish pace. "Bonjour, mon ami," he said to Hastings, taking a seat. "Today we shall see the heart of this mystery laid bare, the emotions they betray what the lips conceal." Hastings nodded, though he felt a familiar twinge of frustration. "You're expecting someone to crack, aren't you? But who, Poirot? They're all so guarded." "Guarded, oui," Poirot replied,
selecting the single croissant. But even the strongest wall has its flaws. We must apply pressure, and the truth will spill forth. The breakfast table was a study in strained civility. Clara Winthrop, her eyes red-rimmed, barely touched her food, her fingers twisting the silk scarf that had replaced her sapphire necklace. Julian Trevelyan, beside her, maintained a veneer of charm, but his jaw was tight, his smiles forced. Dr. Rupert Langley's nervous tics had worsened, his spectacles slipping as he fumbled with his fork. Mrs. Evelyn Carver, serene in her black silk, watched the others with a cool detachment, while Mr. Harold Vance scribbled in his notebook, muttering about legal liabilities. Lady Beatrice, presiding with regal poise, seemed to age with each moment, her emerald eyes shadowed with worry. After breakfast, Poirot requested a private meeting with Clara in the morning room. She entered hesitantly, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know what more I can tell you. I've said all I know." Poirot's expression softened, but his eyes were piercing. "Mademoiselle, I do not doubt your fear, but I must ask you to be brave. The shadow you saw, tell me again with every detail. Was it tall, broad? Did it move with purpose?" Clara's breath hitched. "It was tall, I think. It moved quickly towards the window. I was so frightened I couldn't see clearly, but—" She hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. "I think it was someone I know. The way they moved, it felt familiar." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but insistent. "Familiar, mademoiselle? This is important. Who did it remind you of?" Clara showed expression unreadable. "Very well, mademoiselle. Rest now, but know this. The truth, it cannot be hidden forever." As Clara left, sobbing softly, Hastings whispered, "She's breaking, Poirot. Do you think she's hiding something?" "Oui, mon ami," Poirot said, "but not what you think. Her fear, it is genuine, but it is not only for herself. She protects someone or something." Their next interview was with Dr. Langley, whose florid face was slick with sweat. He sat heavily, his hands shaking as he adjusted his spectacles. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice unsteady, "I've told you everything. I was in the library asleep. I know nothing of this crime." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, Doctor, your interest in toxicology is most intriguing. Tell me, did you ever prescribe lavender water for Mademoiselle Clara's nerves? Or perhaps for another in this house?" Langley's face paled. "Lavender water? No, I prescribed a mild sedative for Clara, nothing more. I don't deal in home remedies." "And yet," Poirot said, producing the charred letter fragment, "this letter, burned in the fireplace, speaks of urgency. Must be told before it is too late. Did you write it, Doctor, or did you receive it?" Langley's hands trembled violently. "I don't know what you're talking about. I never saw that letter." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Very well, but the little grey cells, they note your distress. You may go." The interviews continued, each guest revealing cracks in their composure. Julian Trevelyan, questioned about his debts, grew defensive, insisting they were temporary setbacks. Mrs. Carver, when asked about her presence in the library, admitted to overhearing a heated conversation between Grayson and an unknown man, though she claimed not to know the details. Mr. Vance, pressed about his financial dealings with the estate, snapped that his affairs were none of Poirot's business. The turning point came that afternoon, when Poirot and Hastings returned to the library to examine the desk from which the letter opener had been taken. Poirot's gloved hands traced the wood, pausing at a faint scratch near the drawer. "Hastings," he said, "this desk, it has been opened recently with force. Someone sought something hidden here." He opened the drawer, revealing a small locked diary bound in red leather. The lock was simple, and Poirot, with a hairpin borrowed from Elsie, opened it with ease. Inside were pages of Lady Beatrice's handwriting, detailing the estate's finances and a series of payments to an unnamed recipient. One entry, dated a week prior, read, Grayson's Beatrice. They found her in the drawing room, alone, staring into the fire. Poirot held up the diary, his voice grave. Madame, this was hidden in the library desk. It speaks of Grayson's suspicions. What did he know? Lady Beatrice's face crumpled, and for the first time, her composure shattered. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Grayson knew of my husband's debts. Debts I've been paying in secret to protect Clara's inheritance. He threatened to tell Julian, to ruin the engagement. I begged him to stay silent, but I swear I did not kill him." Poirot's expression softened. "I believe you, Madame, but someone used this knowledge. Someone who wished to point the finger at you." As evening fell, the emotional fracture deepened. At dinner, Clara broke into sobs, fleeing the table, and Julian's attempt to comfort her was rebuffed. Dr. Langley drank heavily, his eyes haunted, while Mrs. Carver's cryptic remarks about hidden truths drew sharp glances. Mr. Vance, clutching his notebook, excused himself early, muttering about legal documents. Poirot, watching it all, leaned toward Hastings. "The cracks, mon ami, they are widening. Tomorrow, we shall set the trap, and the truth will fall into it." As night enveloped Ravenwood Hall, the air was thick with anticipation, the secrets of its inhabitants teetering on the astounding. Chapter 9. The Trap is Set. The fifth day at Ravenwood Hall dawned with a deceptive calm, the autumn sun casting a golden glow over the estate's rolling lawns. Yet within the ancient walls, the atmosphere crackled with tension, as if the house itself sensed the approaching climax of the drama unfolding. The murder of Grayson, the butler, had unraveled the fragile threads of civility among the guests, and each now moved with the wariness of one who knows the hunter is near. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the morning room, felt the weight of the mystery like a physical presence, but he trusted that Hercule Poirot's meticulous mind was closing in on the truth. Poirot entered, his black suit as pristine as ever, his moustache a beacon of order in the chaos. His dark eyes gleamed with purpose as he arranged his notebook, a sketch of the East Wing and the charred letter fragment on the table before him. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, "today we set the trap. The little grey cells, they have woven the threads of this mystery into a net, and soon the guilty one will be caught." Hastings, his curiosity piqued, leaned forward. "A trap, Poirot? What do you mean? Are you ready to name the killer?" Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Not yet, Hastings. The truth, it is like a shy bird." Drawing room that evening, a request she granted with a weary nod. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice strained, "I trust you will end this nightmare soon. The house cannot bear much more." "Fear not, madame," Poirot replied, his tone reassuring but firm. "Hercule Poirot does not fail when the truth is within reach." Throughout the day, Poirot and Hastings revisited the clues, their footsteps echoing through the silent corridors of Ravenwood Hall. Poirot examined the library desk once more, noting the scratch marks and the diary's hiding place. He returned to Clara's bedroom, studying the fireplace, the smudge of grease, and the undisturbed window latch. "The letter opener," he murmured. "It was chosen with purpose, not for convenience, but for significance. It points to someone intimate with this house." Hastings frowned. "But who, Poirot? The diary suggests Lady Beatrice had a motive, but you believe her innocent. Cara's story about the shadow is shaky, and Julian's debts are suspicious. Then there's Langley's nervousness and Mrs. Carver's secrecy." "Précisément," Poirot interrupted, his eyes twinkling. "Each has a secret, each a motive. But the truth lies in the contradictions. The lavender scent,
The burned letter, the false footprint, these are not accidents. They are the work of a mind that seeks to mislead. At luncheon, the guests' unease was palpable. Clara, her face pale, avoided Julian's gaze, her fingers twisting her scarf. Julian, his charm fraying, snapped at a maid who spilled a drop of soup. Dr. Langley, his spectacles fogged, muttered about his medical practice, while Mrs. Carver's cryptic remarks drew sharp looks from Mr. Vance, who clutched his notebook like a shield. Lady Beatrice, her composure strained, excused herself early, citing a headache. As evening approached, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing-room, its heavy drapes and flickering firelight creating an atmosphere of solemnity. The guests sat in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of apprehension. Inspector Grayson stood by the door, his skepticism evident, but he had agreed to attend at Poirot's insistence. Hastings, seated beside Poirot, felt his pulse quicken as the little detective rose, his presence commanding silence. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured, "we are gathered to confront the tragedy that has befallen Ravenwood Hall. Monsieur Grayson, a loyal servant, was murdered, and the truth of his death lies among us. Tonight, I shall reveal the steps that lead to the killer. But first, I ask you to consider, why was Grayson in Mademoiselle Clara's room? What did he know that made him a threat?" Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Julian's jaw tightened.
Poirot nodded, pacing slowly before the group. "Let us reconstruct the night. At 1 o'clock the house is quiet, yet someone moves through the corridors carrying a letter opener from the library. Someone enters Mademoiselle Clara's room, where Grayson is found dead. A scream, a shadow, an open window, but no footprints in the garden, no forced latch. The sapphire necklace left behind. The burned letter with its urgent words and the lavender scent so out of place." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "I put it to you that Grayson was not killed by a thief. He was killed by someone in this house, someone who knew his habits, his duties, someone who burned a letter to hide a secret. And I say this, the letter opener was not taken in haste. It was chosen to point to another." A murmur rippled through the room. Julian stood, his voice sharp. "This is absurd, Poirot. You're accusing us without proof." "Proof, monsieur?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The proof is in your actions. The letter with the red seal, seen by Elsie the maid. Did it concern your debts, perhaps? Or was it a warning to another?" Julian's face flushed, but he said nothing. Poirot turned to Dr. Langley. "And you, doctor? Your interest in toxicology, your nervousness, did you fear Grayson knew of your indiscretions?" Langley sputtered. "I've done nothing wrong." Poirot's gaze shifted to Mrs. Carver. "Madame, you overheard a conversation in the library. Why did you not speak of it sooner? Was it because you, too, have secrets to protect?" Mrs. Carver's lips curved faintly. "I protect only myself, Monsieur Poirot." Finally, Poirot faced Lady Beatrice. "And you, madame, your diary speaks of Grayson's suspicions. You say you begged him to stay silent, but did someone else ensure his silence?" Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "I swear I did not harm him." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Enough. I have set the trap. Tomorrow I shall reveal the truth, but I warn you, the guilty one they cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. Reflect tonight, mes amis, for the little grey cells see all." The guests dispersed, their faces pale, their whispers urgent. Hastings, following Poirot to his room, felt a surge of excitement. "You've rattled them, Poirot. But do you know who did it?" Poirot smiled, his eyes distant. "The trap, mon ami, is not only for the guilty, but for the truth itself. The lavender, the letter, the diary, they point to a motive deeper than we have yet seen. Tomorrow we shall spring the trap, and the killer will be revealed." As night fell, Ravenwood Hall seemed to pulse with anticipation, its secrets poised to cast a long shadow over the estate, and the guests, once bound by polite convention, now moved with the guarded unease of those awaiting judgment. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the drawing room, felt the air crackle with anticipation, as if the house itself knew that Hercule Poirot was about to lay bare its darkest secret. Poirot entered, his black suit impeccable, his mustache a testament to his unyielding order. His dark eyes gleamed with the quiet triumph of a man who has solved a puzzle, and his presence commanded the room even before he spoke. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, "today the little grey cells complete their work. The truth, it is no longer hidden. We shall gather the suspects and the killer will be revealed." Hastings, his heart pounding, nodded. "You've got them, Poirot. I can feel it. But who is it? And how did you know?" Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Patience, Hastings. The truth, it is a mosaic. And each piece, the lavender, the letter, the diary, has found its place. Come, we prepare for the denouement." The guests were summoned to the drawing room at noon, the heavy drapes drawn back to let in the pale light. Clara Winthrop sat pale and trembling, her silk scarf clutched tightly. Julian Trevelyan, beside her, maintained a brittle composure, his eyes darting. Dr. Rupert Langley's hands shook as he adjusted his spectacles, while Mrs. Evelyn Carver's cool gaze betrayed nothing. Mr. Harold Vance clutched his notebook, his face pinched with apprehension. Lady Beatrice, at the head of the room, stood with regal dignity, though her eyes were shadowed with dread. Inspector Grayson, skeptical but curious, stood by the door, his arms crossed. Poirot took his place at the center, his cane planted firmly before him. "Mes amis," he began, his voice clear and resonant, "we are gathered to resolve the tragedy of Ravenwood Hall. Monsieur Grayson, a loyal servant, was murdered, and the clues, oh, how cleverly they were laid, have led us to this moment. Let us reconstruct the crime, step by step, and see the truth emerge." He paced slowly, his eyes sweeping the room. The scene: Mademoiselle Clara's bedroom, 2 in the morning. A scream, a shadow, a body. Grayson stabbed with a letter opener from the library. A sapphire necklace left behind. A window open but unforced. A burned letter in the fireplace, and the scent of lavender. The inspector believes a thief, Tom Rourke, is to blame. But I, Hercule Poirot, say no. This is no burglary. This is a crime of passion, of calculation, of betrayal. Clara gasped, and Julian's jaw tightened. Poirot continued, undeterred. "Let us begin with the letter opener. It was taken from the library desk, a place known to all in this house. Why this weapon? Because it was familiar. One conveniently found days later. A false clue, planted to mislead." He held up the charred letter fragment. "This letter, burned in haste, speaks of urgency. Must be told before it is too late. It bears a red seal like those used by Lady Beatrice, and the diary, hidden in the library desk, reveals her secret. Payments to cover her late husband's debts. Payments Grayson knew of. He threatened to expose them, to ruin Mademoiselle Clara's inheritance." Lady Beatrice's face paled, but Poirot raised a hand. "Madame, you are innocent of murder, but your secret set this tragedy in motion. Grayson was not killed for his knowledge alone. He was killed because he saw something, someone, in Mademoiselle Clara's room that night." Clara's eyes widened, and Julian gripped her hand. Poirot turned to them. "Mademoiselle Clara, your story of the shadow, it is vague, too vague. You said it was familiar, yet you could not name it. Why? Because you feared to name the one you protect." He pivoted to Dr. Langley, whose spectacles slipped as he flinched. "Doctor, your interest in toxicology, your nervousness, you prescribed sedatives for Mademoiselle Clara, oui? But also perhaps something stronger, something to calm a mind in turmoil." Langley stammered. I only helped her nerves." Poirot's gaze shifted to Mrs. Carver,
And you, madame, you overheard a conversation in the library. You said it was between Grayson and an unknown man. But I think you knew who it was. You kept silent to protect your own interests. Mrs. Carver's lips parted, but she said nothing. Poirot turned to Mr. Vance. Monsieur, your obsession with the estate's finances, did you fear Grayson's knowledge of the payments would expose your own mismanagement? Vance sputtered. Preposterous! Finally, Poirot faced Julian Trevelyan. And you, monsieur, your debts, your argument with Grayson, your presence in the library. You were seen with the letter opener that evening by Elsie, the maid. And the lavender scent. It is not only Mrs. Poole's, it is also used in the cologne you wear, a gift from Mademoiselle Clara, no? Julian's face drained of color. You're mad, Poirot! I was in my room! No, monsieur, Poirot said, his voice like steel. You were in Mademoiselle Clara's room. You were the shadow. Grayson entered, perhaps to deliver a letter, perhaps to confront you about your debts. You argued, and in a moment of rage, you seized the letter opener and struck him down. You opened the window to suggest an intruder, burned the letter to hide your motive, and left the necklace to confuse the scene. But the lavender, your cologne, it betrayed you. Clara cried out.
No! Julian, tell him it's not true! Grayson stepped forward, his handcuffs ready. Julian Trevelyan, you're under arrest. Poirot raised a hand. One moment, Inspector. Monsieur Trevelyan, you acted alone, oui? No one else knew? Julian nodded, his face ashen. No one, I swear. Clara sobbed, collapsing into her chair. Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, and Dr. Langley looked away, his hands shaking. Mrs. Carver's expression remained unreadable, while Mr. Vance muttered about legal repercussions. Poirot turned to the group, his voice solemn. The truth, it is painful, but it is necessary. Hercule Poirot has done his duty. As Julian was led away, the drawing-room fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over Ravenwood Hall like a final curtain. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The aftermath of Julian Trevelyan's confession hung over Ravenwood Hall like a lingering fog, muting the grandeur of its towers and dimming the glow of its chandeliers. The sun, low in the sky, cast long shadows across the estate's manicured lawns, as if the house itself mourned the betrayal that had been laid bare. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the drawing-room window, felt a strange mix of relief and melancholy. The mystery of Grayson's murder had been solved, yet the cost of truth was etched in the faces of those left behind. Hercule Poirot, ever the embodiment of order, sat in a high-backed chair, his hands folded neatly over his cane. His black suit was as impeccable as ever, his mustache a beacon of precision, but his dark eyes held a reflective depth, as if the little grey cells were now turning inward. Mon ami, he said to Hastings, the case, it is closed. The truth has been revealed, and justice, it will follow. Yet there is always a moment, no? When one must pause and consider the human heart. Hastings nodded, though his mind was still reeling from the morning's drama. You were brilliant, Poirot. The way you pieced it all together, the lavender, the letter, the diary. But I can't help feeling sorry for Clara. She loved Julian, didn't she? Oui, Poirot said softly, his gaze distant. Love, it is a powerful force, Hastings. It blinds, it binds, and sometimes it destroys. Mademoiselle Clara, she will suffer, but she will endure. The heart, it is resilient. The guests had dispersed after Julian's arrest, each retreating to their rooms or the quiet corners of the hall. Clara, her face pale and tear-streaked, had been escorted to her room by a maid, her engagement shattered along with her trust. Lady Beatrice, her regal composure fraying, had withdrawn to her study, ostensibly to manage the estate's affairs, but more likely to grapple with the weight of her family's secrets. Dr. Rupert Langley, his nervous tics subdued, had offered to...
Vance, muttering about legal repercussions, had begun drafting letters, his pen scratching like an accusation. Inspector Grayson, though initially skeptical of Poirot's methods, had conceded the detective's brilliance. "You've done it, Mr. Poirot," he said, as he prepared to leave with Julian in custody. "I'll admit, I thought it was that thief, Rourke. But you saw what we missed." Poirot inclined his head. "The little grey cells, Inspector. They see what the eyes do not. But you have my thanks for your diligence." As the inspector's car crunched down the gravel drive, Poirot and Hastings took a final walk through the rose garden, the air cool and scented with fading blooms. The false footprint, now irrelevant, had been trampled by the police. But Poirot paused by the spot beneath Clara's window. "Here, mon ami," he said, "is where the lie began. The open window, the planted footprint. They were the work of a desperate man, but not a clever one. Monsieur Trevelyan. He underestimated Hercule Poirot." Hastings frowned, kicking at a loose pebble. "But why Grayson, Poirot? Why not confront Lady Beatrice directly about the debts?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Because Grayson was the gatekeeper, Hastings. He knew of the payments, the secrets in the diary. He was loyal to Lady Beatrice, but he was also a man of principle. He confronted Trevelyan, perhaps to warn him, perhaps to protect Mademoiselle Clara. And Trevelyan, in his panic, saw no other way." They returned to the drawing room where Lady Beatrice awaited them, her face drawn but composed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite the strain, "I owe you a debt of gratitude. You have saved this family from further disgrace, though the cost is heavy." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, it is my duty to seek the truth, however painful. But I must ask one final question. The diary, with its mention of Grayson's suspicions. Did you suspect Trevelyan?" Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "I feared something. Julian's charm, it was too polished, his assurances too glib. But I never imagined he would stoop to murder. For Clara's sake, I hoped I was wrong." "You were wise to hope, madame," Poirot said gently. "But the truth, it does not bend to hope. It is absolute." As evening fell, Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart Ravenwood Hall. Their bags were packed, and the Rolls-Royce waited in the drive. The guests gathered to bid them farewell, their expressions a mix of relief and exhaustion. Clara, still pale, managed a weak nod, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Dr. Langley mumbled a thank you, his spectacles fogged. Mrs. Carver offered a cryptic smile, her secrets still her own. Mr. Vance, ever practical, pressed a card into Poirot's hand, offering legal services should the need arise. Lady Beatrice, standing at the hall's grand entrance, clasped Poirot's hand.
"Ah, darkness, I shall not forget it."
Poirot bowed, his moustache twitching. "Madame, it is the work of Hercule Poirot to bring order where there is chaos. Adieu." As the car pulled away, Hastings leaned back, his mind still turning over the case. "What now, Poirot? Back to London and your quiet flat?" "Oui, mon ami," Poirot said, his eyes twinkling. "But the world, it is never quiet for long. There will be other puzzles, other hearts to unravel, and the little grey cells, they are always ready." The car wound through the Sussex Downs, leaving Ravenwood Hall behind, its towers fading into the twilight. The mystery was solved, the killer caught. But Hastings knew that the echoes of this tragedy would linger, a reminder of the fragile balance between love, greed, and truth. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The journey back to London was a quiet one, the Rolls-Royce gliding through the twilight of the Sussex Downs as the last vestiges of Ravenwood Hall faded into the distance. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated beside Hercule Poirot, felt a peculiar sense of disquiet, despite the resolution of the case. The confession of Julian Trevelyan.
Basically, on details of small good spill area when all the freedom he's good, not him to eat make untangles of you, which is backward agents. I get your ain't no end backs. The element combination, but a load and drift of the surface smolder of those kids die the where our shirt with Twitter fiest is on yellow. Now the mentions Corey. I mean, I don't know rings, gram and frank. How's it? Russian, yes, but tell me, what you needed, Lord. Martin, these square, making it school. I read it better. Very memorable with the restriction. If I'll see your comfort. Oh, what is coming at me? You're right, bold, never gone now. Oh, we're in the act. But I look at what you must save me. Skid and lady to never lost. Gymnast, age to reason is good. So, they was hot, still make a guy, then taking the chair. I did have I'm very native and skid. That judge, I'm to political step on that. You're just Sir, Doctor of London, purchasing, sir. I'm still a quick, free time on the sorry. I know he's a army wings this evening. But never, you gave him everything. Children, there's some of things. Full thing enough. Quail sent the off the middle. But okay, hold them. The Mary, I was doing that tea. Rack, I get the rest of it. Maybe I do a hair ring doing in it. Cooking weird. There's a lot of choose now. It sounds. And that just very good. That's just everybody will like a photo. Only on the nail, the whole end to the movie. Let them turn and with everything. Mom, and the same chins. And all even all night fruit tends to be Mrs. Link ahead. So I have straight low reach. And then he lemons. My friend is in one hair. When she read it, but the word name signal of fright. The goal is that there was then Margaret record Elizabeth was it taps that were secrets. Can we did you begin to get see what it's just the very part of nothing is so that was good long times it's the people it's and let's not they're not able to see it are at least right even when we I'm you check your right go okay help me I'm like hey no as mission perhaps that when they what's me I never will go for so then time I would for the years me think they are I mean I would 0 to 3 and hanging your lead but it's not we are not champion never include connected but love of coffee and anticipation look like that but it's always never Mars and I'll go over y'all ever to him king I will look up so he has written thing my tell through my day nothing is that minimum joining it I lost up the pretty I'm like a voice first thing you just the which is for the around just so I don't my word giving up plans we actually I mean true ship I measure it we don't on
Threat. He knew of Trevelyan's debts, perhaps even of his plans to secure Mademoiselle Clara's inheritance through marriage. To confront Lady Beatrice would risk exposure. To silence Grayson was to buy time. But time, it is a luxury the guilty cannot afford. Hastings frowned, piecing it together. And the lavender? You said it was his cologne, but could it have been Mrs. Poole's after all? No, Poirot said, waving a hand. The lavender, it was a clue of exquisite subtlety. Mrs. Poole's lavender water, it is medicinal, sharp. Trevelyan's cologne, a gift from Mademoiselle Clara, was lighter, more refined. The scent in the room was his, lingering from his presence. The little grey cells, they do not mistake such details. As they neared London, the conversation turned to the other guests. What about Mrs. Carver? Hastings asked. She was so cryptic, always watching. Did she know more than she let on? Poirot's moustache twitched. Madame Carver, she is a woman of secrets, but not of murder. She observed, she listened, perhaps to protect her own interests. Her silence in the library, overhearing Grayson's argument, was not complicity but caution. She is one who survives by knowing more than she reveals. And Dr. Langley? Hastings pressed. His nervousness, his toxicology books, surely he was hiding something. Oui, Poirot said, his tone thoughtful. The good doctor, he has his own burdens. His interest in Mademoiselle Clara, it was more than professional, no? But it was not murder. His nerves, they betrayed his guilt, but it was the guilt of a man who loves in vain, not of a killer. They arrived at Poirot's London flat as night fell. The city's lights a stark contrast to the sombre grandeur of Ravenwood Hall. The flat, with its polished surfaces and neatly arranged furniture, was a haven of order, and Poirot visibly relaxed as he stepped inside. Home, mon ami, he said, removing his hat with a flourish. Here the chaos of the world is kept at bay. Hastings, settling into an armchair, accepted a glass of brandy from Poirot's meticulously stocked cabinet. What now, Poirot? Another case? Another puzzle?
Poirot smiled, his eyes twinkling. Always, Hastings. The world, it is full of puzzles, and Hercule Poirot, he is never idle. But for tonight we rest. The little grey cells, they have earned their repose. As they sipped their drinks, Hastings reflected on the case. The clues, the letter opener, the burned letter, the false footprint, had seemed so disparate, yet Poirot had woven them into a coherent whole. The diary, the lavender, the shadow in Clara's room, they were not mere details, but signposts to the truth. And Julian Trevelyan, driven by greed and desperation, had fallen into the trap Poirot had so carefully set. Do you ever doubt yourself, Poirot? Hastings up.
You're right. Poirot set down his glass, his expression serious. Doubt, mon ami. It is the companion of every detective. But I trust the method, the order, the logic. The little grey cells, they do not lie. They see the pattern where others see only chaos. And in the end, the truth, it always reveals itself. The fire crackled in the grate, casting warm shadows across the room. Hastings leaned back, feeling the weight of the case lift, if only slightly. Ravenwood Hall was behind them, its secrets exposed, its wounds beginning to heal. But the memory of Clara's tearful face, of Lady Beatrice's quiet strength lingered, a reminder of the human cost of truth. As Poirot began to tidy his desk, arranging his pens with meticulous care, Hastings smiled. You're incorrigible, Poirot. Even after a case like this, you're fussing over your desk. Poirot's moustache twitched with amusement. Order, Hastings, is the foundation of all things. Without it, we are lost. Now, to bed. Tomorrow, the world may bring us another riddle, and Hercule Poirot will be ready. The night closed over London, and Ravenwood Hall faded into memory, its echoes of truth a testament to the power of the little grey cells. Chapter 13. The Unseen Threads. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting a soft glow across the polished surfaces of his meticulously arranged sitting room. Captain Arthur Hastings, lingering over a late breakfast of toast and marmalade, felt the weight of the Ravenwood case still clinging to him, like the faint scent of lavender that seemed to linger in his memory. The resolution of Grayson's murder had brought justice, yet the human cost, Clara's heartbreak, Lady Beatrice's burden, left a bittersweet aftertaste. He glanced at Poirot, who sat at his desk, pen in hand, reviewing a small stack of correspondence with his usual precision. Mon ami, Poirot said, sensing Hastings' gaze. You are pensive this morning. The case, it is closed, yet you dwell on it, none? Hastings set down his teacup with a sigh. I suppose I do, Poirot. It's just, there are so many loose ends. Clara's future, the estate's finances, even Mrs. Carver's cryptic behaviour. Did we really uncover everything? Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement or perhaps mild reproach. Hastings, you seek the neatness of a novel's end, where all is tied with a bow, but life, it is messier. The little grey cells, they have solved the crime, but the human heart, it weaves threads that remain unseen. Let us reflect, and perhaps we shall find clarity. The detective rose, his black suit as immaculate as ever, and paced the room, his cane tapping softly on the polished floor. The murder of Monsieur Grayson, he began. It was a crime of desperation, driven by Monsieur Trevelyan's greed.
Ravenwood Hall. Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. You mean there's more to the case? Something we missed? Not missed, mon ami, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. Observed, but not yet fully understood. The diary of Lady Beatrice, the payments to an unknown recipient, there is a story there, one that touches the heart of the family. And Madame Carver, her silence, her watchfulness, there is a purpose to it, I think. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. You think Mrs. Carver was involved in the payments? Or that she knew more about Julian's motives? Poirot paused, his fingers brushing his moustache. Madame Carver, she is a woman of calculation. She did not kill, but she knew something, perhaps of the debts, perhaps of another secret. Let us consider. She was in the library. She overheard Grayson's argument, yet she did not speak. Why?
because to speak would reveal her own stake in the game.
Hastings rubbed his chin. And the payments in the diary? You don't think they were just for Sir Reginald's debts?
No, Poirot said, his voice low. The diary. It spoke of payments to protect Mademoiselle Clara's inheritance. But to whom? Not a creditor, I think, but someone closer, someone with power over the family. I suspect a blackmailer, Hastings, one who used Grayson's knowledge to their advantage.
The idea sent a chill through Hastings. A blackmailer? But who? Not Julian, he's the murderer.
Précisément, Poirot said. Trevelyan killed to protect his own plans, but the payments predate his arrival at Ravenwood. No, the blackmailer is another, one who remains in the shadows. And I believe Madame Carver knows their identity.
Hastings' eyes widened. You're saying there's another crime hidden in this mess? Should we go back to Ravenwood? Poirot shook his head.
No, mon ami. The murder is solved, and our duty there is done. But the little grey cells, they do not rest. I shall write to Lady Beatrice, urging her to examine her accounts with care. And Madame Carver, perhaps a discreet inquiry into her past would be wise.
They spent the morning in quiet discussion, Poirot drafting his letter to Lady Beatrice with his usual elegance.
Madame, he wrote, the truth of Grayson's death has been revealed, but I counsel vigilance. The payments in your diary suggest a shadow over your family, one that may yet threaten Mademoiselle Clara. Trust no one until all is clear.
As Poirot sealed the envelope, Hastings ventured another question. What about Dr. Langley? His nervousness, his feelings for Clara. Could he be the blackmailer? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The good doctor, he is a man of passion, not calculation. His guilt is of the heart, not the ledger. No, the blackmailer is more subtle, more patient, but we shall leave the
formal charge and thanking Poirot for his assistance. Your methods, Mr. Poirot, the inspector wrote, are unorthodox, but effective. The case is airtight. Poirot smiled, handing the telegram to Hastings. Airtight, he says, and yet the air of Ravenwood still holds secrets. But for now, we rest. They dined that evening at a quiet restaurant. The clink of glasses and murmur of conversation, a welcome change from the tension of Ravenwood Hall. Hastings, sipping his wine, felt a sense of closure, though the unseen threads Poirot had mentioned lingered in his mind. "Do you ever tire of it, Poirot?" he asked. "The lies, the secrets, the pain?" Poirot set down his fork, his expression thoughtful. "Tire, mon ami? No. The human heart, it is a puzzle, and each case is a challenge to the little grey cells. To bring order to chaos, to find truth in deception, this is the work of Hercule Poirot, and it is a work I shall never abandon." As they returned to the flat, the London night enveloped them, its lights a promise of new mysteries. Ravenwood Hall, with its echoes of betrayal and loss, was behind them, but Hastings knew that Poirot's mind was already turning to the next puzzle, the next truth waiting to be unveiled. Chapter 14. The Shadow of Doubt. The soft glow of London's street lamps filtered through the windows of Hercule Poirot's flat, casting a warm, ordered calm over the sitting room. Yet, as Captain Arthur Hastings sipped his evening brandy, the events of Ravenwood Hall lingered in his mind, like an unresolved chord. The murder of Grayson had been solved, Julian Trevelyan's confession sealing the case, but Poirot's cryptic hints about unseen threads, a potential blackmailer, Mrs. Carver's silence, gnawed at Hastings. The little detective, seated at his desk, was polishing his silver pen with a silk cloth, his movements precise, but his eyes betrayed a restless energy. "Mon ami?" Poirot said, glancing up. "You are like a dog with a bone, non? The case is closed, yet you chew on it still." Hastings set down his glass, a rueful smile on his face. "I can't help it, Poirot.
You've got me wondering about those payments in Lady Beatrice's diary. If there's a blackmailer, shouldn't we do something? For Clara's sake, at least. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of both amusement and approval. Your heart, Hastings, it is ever gallant. The matter of the payments, it is a shadow that lingers, but we must proceed with care. To return to Ravenwood now would be to stir a hornet's nest without proof. The little grey cells, they require evidence discreetly. Through my contacts in London, the name of Madame Carver, it appears in certain circles of influence and secrecy. She's no stranger to the art of leverage, Hastings. You mean she's the blackmailer? Hastings asked, his voice rising with excitement. No, Poirot said, raising a hand. I say only that she knows more than she has revealed. Her silence in the library, her watchfulness, she is a player in a game we have not yet fully seen. But for now, we wait. The truth, it has a way of emerging when least expected. The morning brought a new development, a letter from Lady Beatrice, delivered by express post. Poirot opened it with his usual precision, his eyes scanning the elegant script. Mon Dieu, he murmured, passing the letter to Hastings. The plot, it thickens. The letter was brief but urgent. Lady Beatrice wrote of a discovery in the estate's accounts. A series of payments, disguised as charitable donations, had been made to a private account in London, linked to a name she did not recognize, Eleanor Vaughan. I fear, she wrote, that Grayson's death was only the beginning. Clara is distraught, and I cannot shake the feeling that we are still in danger. I beg your counsel, Monsieur Poirot. Hastings looked up, his pulse quickening. Eleanor Vaughan? Could that be Mrs. Carver? Her first name is Evelyn, isn't it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. A possibility, Hastings, but not a certainty. The name Vaughan. It is unfamiliar, but the initials, they are close, no? We must investigate. I shall send a telegram to my friend, Inspector Japp at Scotland Yard. He has resources for such matters. The rest of the day was spent in quiet activity. Poirot drafted his telegram, while Hastings, restless, paced the flat, his mind turning over the case. The clues, the lavender scent, the burned letter, the diary, had pointed to Julian, but this new revelation suggested a deeper conspiracy. Was Mrs. Carver manipulating events from the shadows, or was there another player, unseen even by Poirot? By evening, a reply from Inspector Japp arrived, brief but illuminating. Eleanor Vaughan, it read, known alias of Evelyn Carver, widow with ties to financial circles, suspected of discreet influence in several estates. No criminal record, but proceed with caution. Poirot's moustache twitched with satisfaction. Voila, Hastings, the shadow takes form. Madame Carver or Vaughan is no mere guest. She is a spider, spinning her web around Ravenwood Hall. But what's her motive? Hastings asked. If she's blackmailing Lady Beatrice, why stay silent during the murder investigation? Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Because, mon ami, to speak would be to risk her own exposure. She knew of Trevelyan's debts, perhaps even encouraged them to tighten her hold on the family. Grayson's curiosity threatened her plans, but Trevelyan's act of threat,
unwittingly serving her purpose. Hastings shook his head, marveling at the complexity. So, Julian was a pawn in her game. Perhaps, Poirot said. Or perhaps they were partners, until his desperation led to murder. We shall know more when we confront Madame Carver, but for now, we prepare. I shall write to her, inviting her to London under the guise of discussing the case. The little grey cells, they will coax the truth from her. As night fell, Poirot drafted his letter with care, his pen moving with the precision of a surgeon. Madame Carver, he wrote, I have uncovered matters concerning Ravenwood Hall that require your insight. I request your presence in London at your earliest convenience. The truth, it waits for no one. Hastings, watching Poirot seal the envelope, felt a surge of anticipation. You're setting another trap, aren't you? Poirot smiled, his eyes twinkling. A trap, oui, but a subtle one. Madame Carver, she is clever, but she is not Hercule Poirot. We shall see if she takes the bait.
The London night enveloped the flat, its quiet order a stark contrast to the turmoil of Ravenwood Hall. Hastings, settling into his armchair, felt the weight of the case shift. The unseen threads Poirot had spoken of, now coming into focus. The murder was solved, but the deeper mystery, the shadow of doubt cast by Mrs. Carver, was only beginning to unravel. Chapter 15. The Final Thread. The London morning was crisp, the air tinged with the faint bite of autumn, as Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window of Hercule Poirot's flat, watching the bustle of the city below. The resolution of Grayson's murder at Ravenwood Hall had brought a semblance of closure, yet the revelation of Mrs. Evelyn Carver's alias, Eleanor Vaughan, and her potential role as a blackmailer had cast a new shadow over the case. Hastings felt a restless energy, his mind turning over the unseen threads Poirot had promised to unravel. The little detective, seated at his desk, was reviewing a telegram from Inspector Japp, his moustache as pristine as ever, his dark eyes alight with the quiet triumph of a man nearing the end of a chase. "Mon ami," Poirot said, setting down the telegram, "you are impatient, no? The truth, it is close, and today we shall tie the final thread of this mystery." Hastings turned, his curiosity piqued. "Mrs. Carver, you mean? Has she responded to your letter?" Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Oui, Hastings. She arrives this afternoon under the pretext of discussing the Ravenwood affair. But it is not hide from the light of Hercule Poirot."
The morning passed in preparation. Poirot arranged the sitting room with care, placing chairs to create an atmosphere of intimacy and pressure. He positioned a small table with the charred letter fragment, Lady Beatrice's diary, and a photograph of Ravenwood Hall, each a silent accusation. Hastings, assisting, felt the familiar thrill of Poirot's methodical approach. "You're going to confront her directly, aren't you?" he asked. "Directly, but with finesse," Poirot replied, adjusting a cushion. "The mind of Madame Carver, it is sharp, but it is not infallible. We shall use the truth to unsettle her." At precisely 2 o'clock, Mrs. Carver arrived, her black silk dress absorbing the light, her demeanor as composed as ever. Her dark eyes met Poirot's with a flicker of wariness, but her smile was cool. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, taking a seat, "your letter was most intriguing. You believe I have more to offer regarding Ravenwood." Poirot inclined his head, his voice smooth but piercing. "Madame, you are a woman of observation, of secrets. I believe you hold the key to a mystery deeper than the murder of Grayson. Shall we speak of Eleanor Vaughan?" Mrs. Carver's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "An old name, Monsieur Poirot, a relic of a past life. I am Evelyn Carver now, a guest at Ravenwood, nothing more." "Non, madame," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "You are more. The payments in Lady Beatrice's diary, disguised as charitable donations, were made to an account linked to Eleanor Vaughan. You knew of Sir Reginald's debts, and you used that knowledge to extract money from the family. Grayson, he discovered this, oui?" Mrs. Carver's fingers tightened on her handbag. "You have no proof, Monsieur Poirot. Speculation is not evidence." Poirot produced the diary, opening it to the marked page. "This, madame, is evidence. Payments to an unnamed recipient, noted by Grayson. And this letter fragment must be told before it is too late. It was written to you, was it not? A warning from Grayson, perhaps, to cease your demands." Mrs. Carver's composure wavered, her eyes darting to the fragment. I received no such letter. Grayson was a meddler, nothing more." Poirot leaned forward, his voice like steel. "And yet, madame, you were in the library when Grayson argued with Trevelyan. You heard his accusations, his threats to expose the truth. You did not kill him, no. That was Trevelyan's crime, but you profited from his silence. You blackmailed Lady Beatrice, using her fear for Mademoiselle Clara's inheritance." The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Hastings held his breath, watching Mrs. Carver's face. For a moment, she seemed poised to deny everything, but then her shoulders sagged and her voice
confided in me years ago before his death. I saw an opportunity. Lady Beatrice paid to protect Clara, and Grayson, he began to suspect. I urged him to stay silent, but he was stubborn. I never meant for him to die. Poirot's expression softened, but his tone remained firm. And Trevelyan? Did you know of his plans? Mrs. Carver shook her head. I suspected his debts, his ambition, but murder? No. That was his folly, not mine. Poirot nodded, closing the diary. Madame, you will face justice for your actions. I shall inform Inspector Japp of your confession, and Lady Beatrice will be freed from your shadow. Mrs. Carver rose, her face pale but resolute. Do what you must, Monsieur Poirot. I am no murderer, but I am not innocent. As she left, Hastings exhaled, his mind reeling. You did it, Poirot. You caught her. But will Clara and Lady Beatrice ever recover? Poirot sighed, his eyes distant. Recovery, mon ami, is a journey. They have the truth now, and with it, the chance to heal. The little grey cells, they have done their work. That evening, Poirot and Hastings dined quietly, the weight of the case lifting with each passing moment. The letter to Lady Beatrice was sent, detailing Mrs. Carver's confession and urging her to secure the estate's finances. A telegram to Inspector Japp ensured that Mrs. Carver's activities would be investigated, a web of blackmail dismantled. As they sat by the fire, Hastings raised his glass. To the little grey cells, Poirot. They never fail. Poirot smiled, his moustache twitching. To the truth, Hastings. It is the light that guides us, always. The London night closed around them, and Ravenwood Hall, with its secrets and sorrows, faded into the past. The final thread had been tied, and Hercule Poirot, ever the master of order, was ready for the next mystery to unravel.